Chapter 1: The Ocean That Never Sleeps. Tonight, we drift into the dark water. The Pacific Ocean stretches before us, vast, eternal, impossibly deep. Moonlight touches its surface like silver thread, but beneath that fragile veil lies something else entirely. A world without sun, without sound. A realm where pressure crushes steel and darkness becomes absolute. For centuries, sailors have whispered of lights beneath the waves, glowing orbs that rise from the depths and vanish without explanation. Objects that move with purpose through water that should be still. And in recent decades, those whispers have grown louder, not from superstition, but from radar screens, sonar readings, and the testimonies of those trained to see what others cannot. The question is simple, haunting, and unanswered. What secrets lie beneath the Pacific's impossible depths? This is not a story of certainty. It is a story of shadows and echoes, of the space between what we know and what we feel. It begins where light fades and language fails, in the cold embrace of the ocean that never sleeps. The Pacific is not merely large. It is overwhelming in its scale. It covers more than 63 million square miles, nearly a third of the Earth's entire surface. You could fit all the world's continents inside it and still have room for another Africa, from the Bering Strait to the Antarctic ice shelf, from the coasts of Asia to the shores of the Americas. The Pacific dominates our planet in a way that defies casual comprehension. And yet, despite its vastness, despite the fact that it touches more nations than any other ocean, we know astonishingly little about what lies within it. Stand on any beach along the Pacific coast, and you are looking at a mystery. Not a poetic mystery, but a literal one. The water before you conceals trenches deeper than any canyon on land, mountain ranges taller than the Himalayas, and ecosystems that exist in complete independence from the sun. Beneath those waves, volcanic vents pump superheated water into the darkness, creating chemical gardens where life thrives in conditions that would sterilize most of Earth's surface. Scientists estimate that we have explored less than 5% of the global ocean, but in the Pacific, that percentage drops even further. There are regions, vast, empty regions, shown as blue voids on our maps, where no submarine has ventured, no sonar has pinged, no human eye has witnessed what moves through the water. These are not small gaps in our knowledge. These are territories larger than countries, deeper than our deepest minds, and more alien than the surface of Mars. And within these territories, patterns have begun to emerge, patterns that suggest something more than natural phenomena. The first whispers came from fishermen, men who spent their lives reading the water, who could predict weather by the taste of salt and judge depth by the color of the sea. They spoke of lights that appeared beneath their boats at night, not the familiar glow of bioluminescent plankton, but focused beams of illumination that moved with deliberate intent, lights that followed them for miles, before descending again into the abyss. Then came the military reports. Declassified documents from the Cold War era revealed that both American and Soviet naval forces had encountered unidentified submerged objects on multiple occasions. Objects that appeared on sonar, moving at speeds impossible for any known submarine. Objects that dove to depths no human vessel could survive. Objects that seemed to vanish from one location and reappear in another, as if the ocean itself were folding to accommodate their passage. And in recent years, civilian researchers equipped with modern technology have begun documenting phenomena that were once dismissed as sailor tales. High-definition cameras capturing luminous shapes moving beneath the surface. Recreational divers filming objects that demonstrate controlled flight underwater. Satellite imagery revealing thermal anomalies on the ocean floor. Heat signatures that pulse with regularity, suggesting not geological activity, but something operational. The evidence is fragmentary, scattered across decades and disciplines, but when assembled, it forms a picture that cannot be easily dismissed. Something moves through the Pacific, something that does not announce itself, does not seek contact, but operates in the spaces we cannot reach. And the question that haunts every researcher who has looked closely at this phenomenon is not whether these objects exist. The documentation is too consistent, too widespread for wholesale dismissal. The question is, what are they, and why do they remain hidden in the one place on Earth where we are least able to follow? But before we can pursue that question, we must first descend. We must leave the sunlit surface behind and enter the realm where mystery becomes tangible, where the ocean's secrets are written not in light, but in darkness and silence.
Chapter 2: Echoes Beneath the Waves. A quiet descent into the unknown. Imagine standing at the edge of the Mariana Trench, the deepest point in any ocean on Earth. If you could somehow drain all the water from this chasm, you would be looking into a void so profound that it would take nearly 7 miles to reach the bottom. Mount Everest placed inside this trench would disappear entirely beneath the waves, its summit resting more than a mile below sea level. But the Mariana Trench is not alone. The Pacific is riddled with such abysses. The Tonda Trench, the Philippine Trench, the Kermadec Trench. Each one plunges into depths where the pressure exceeds 1,000 atmospheres, enough to compress a human body into something unrecognizable in an instant. At these depths, light does not exist, not as refracted sunlight, not as the faint glow of bioluminescence, just absolute, unbroken darkness. The kind of darkness that has never seen a dawn, never known the concept of day. Darkness as a physical presence, heavy and total. And yet, life persists. In 1977, scientists exploring hydrothermal vents near the Galapagos Islands made a discovery that fundamentally changed our understanding of biology. They found ecosystems thriving in complete darkness, fueled not by photosynthesis, but by chemosynthesis. Organisms that drew energy from the chemical spewing from the Earth's crust. Tube worms 8 feet long, eyeless shrimp, bacteria that could survive in water hot enough to melt lead. These discoveries proved something extraordinary. Life does not require the sun. It can flourish in environments we once considered sterile. it can adapt to extremes we thought impossible. And if life can exist in such places, what else might exist there, hidden from view? The ocean floor is not the flat, featureless plain most imagine. It is a landscape of staggering complexity. Volcanic ridges rise from the seafloor like the spines of buried giants. Seamounts, underwater mountains that never breach the surface, tower thousands of feet above the surrounding plains, creating hidden peaks where currents converge and life clusters in unexpected abundance. There are underwater canyons carved by ancient rivers when sea levels were lower, their walls now slicked with deep-sea corals and sponges that have been growing undisturbed for thousands of years. There are underwater volcanoes that erupt not with lava, but with methane and sediment, creating bubbling mounds on the seafloor that rise and collapse in cycles measured in centuries. And then there are the anomalies. In 2012, during a deep-sea mapping expedition off the coast of Japan, researchers detected a sonar return that did not match any known geological feature. The object, if it could be called that, appeared to be roughly circular, approximately 300 feet in diameter, and situated at a depth of 4,000 feet. Its edges were too smooth, too regular to be a natural rock formation. When the research vessel returned a week later to conduct a more detailed survey, the object was gone, disappeared. No debris, no disturbance in the surrounding sediment, just an empty section of seafloor where something had been. The lead researcher, Dr. Hiroshi Takahashi, noted in his expedition log that the sonar signature resembled something manufactured rather than formed. But without physical evidence, the finding was filed as an unexplained anomaly, and the expedition moved on. Similar reports have accumulated over the decades. A French oceanographic vessel detected a series of geometric shapes on the floor of the Pacific near French Polynesia, patterns that suggested deliberate placement rather than random distribution. An American research team exploring the Emperor Seamount chain found metal fragments embedded in rock at depths where no shipwreck had ever been recorded. The metal was analyzed and found to be an alloy not used in any maritime or aerospace application. These discoveries do not make headlines. They are published in specialized journals, discussed at academic conferences, and then quietly absorbed into the growing catalog of things we cannot explain. But they add up, slowly, persistently, creating a mosaic of strangeness that covers the Pacific floor like a hidden map. Some researchers have begun to argue that we may be looking at the problem backwards. Instead of asking, why are there anomalies in the ocean, perhaps we should be asking, why wouldn't there be? The ocean is the largest biome on the planet. It contains more livable space than all terrestrial environments. It is older than the continents, more stable than the atmosphere, and far less explored than outer space. If intelligence, any intelligence, sought a place to operate without detection, the deep ocean would be the logical choice. Not because it is mysterious, but because it is practical. No satellites can see through water. No aerial surveillance can penetrate the depths. Human presence is fleeting, expensive, and limited to a handful of research institutions and military organizations. For every manned submersible dive into the deep Pacific, there are thousands of square miles that remain untouched, unwatched, unknown. A facility built at 3,000 feet would be invisible to surface observation. A craft capable of moving through water at high speed would leave no contrail, no exhaust signature, no trace except a fleeting sonar echo that could be dismissed as equipment error or biological noise. And the ocean offers something else: resources. The seafloor is rich in rare earth elements, materials essential for advanced electronics and energy systems. Manganese nodules litter the abysmal plains like dark potatoes, each one containing cobalt, nickel, copper, and trace elements that are increasingly scarce on land. Hydrothermal vents provide geothermal energy in abundance. Seawater itself contains dissolved metals, deuterium for fusion reactions, and chemical compounds that could support technologies we have not yet imagined. If an intelligence required raw materials, energy, and concealment, the ocean would provide all three in abundance. But who would build such a thing, and why remain hidden? These are the questions that pull us deeper, not into speculation, but into the documented accounts of those who have seen something operating beneath the waves, something that moves with purpose, responds to presence, and vanishes before confirmation can be achieved. And nowhere is this phenomenon more concentrated, more consistently reported than the waters off the coast of California, where the boundary between ocean and sky becomes thin, and where the mystery rises to meet the surface.
Chapter 3: The Catalina Anomaly. Off the coast of Southern California, between the mainland and Santa Catalina Island, lies a channel roughly 20 miles wide. By day, it glimmers blue-green beneath the sun, a popular route for boats, a corridor for marine life, a scenic stretch of water frequented by tourists and fishermen alike. By night, it transforms. The Santa Catalina Channel has become one of the most documented UFO and USO hotspots in the world. Not a location of occasional sightings, but a persistent zone of activity where encounters occur with startling regularity. Encounters that span decades, involve multiple independent witnesses, and resist conventional explanation despite rigorous investigation. The accounts come from every angle of credibility. Navy radar operators stationed aboard vessels in the channel have reported objects moving underwater at over 500 knots, speeds that would vaporize any known submarine. The pressure wave alone from such velocity would be visible on the surface as a massive disturbance. Yet witnesses describe the water remaining calm, undisturbed, as if the objects moved through a different medium entirely. Commercial fishermen describe spheres of light rising from the ocean floor, circling their boats in slow, deliberate patterns, and then descending again in perfect silence. These are men not prone to exaggeration. Their livelihoods depend on understanding the water, reading its moods, distinguishing between the ordinary and the strange. And what they report is not ambiguous. Structured objects, exhibiting controlled movement, demonstrating awareness of their surroundings. Pilots flying the coastal route have logged sightings of glowing objects breaching the surface, accelerating vertically with no visible propulsion, and disappearing into the night sky within seconds. Air traffic controllers at Los Angeles International Airport have occasionally detected these objects on radar, fast-moving targets that appear, vanish, and reappear in ways that violate every principle of conventional aerodynamics. But perhaps the most compelling account comes from 1992.
A Navy destroyer was conducting routine anti-submarine warfare exercises near the channel. The mission was standard: deploy sonar, track simulated targets, practice detection protocols. But during the exercise, sonar operators detected something unexpected: multiple large objects moving in formation beneath the vessel. The objects were massive, estimated at over 40 feet in length based on their sonar returns. They maintained perfect spacing, moving in a pattern that suggested coordination, intelligence, purpose. The lead operator, a veteran with over 15 years of experience, initially assumed they were tracking a pod of whales. But the behavior was wrong. Whales do not hold geometric formations. They do not accelerate in unison. They do not move at the speeds being recorded. The formation descended rapidly, dropping from 200 feet to over 600 feet in less than 30 seconds. Then, as suddenly as they had appeared, the objects began to rise. Crew members on deck were alerted. Officers gathered at the rail, watching the water as sonar reported the objects approaching the surface. And then they breached. Not with the explosive force of a missile launch, but smoothly, gracefully, as if passing from water to air required no transition at all. Witnesses described luminous shapes, not solid but coherent, glowing with a soft bluish light that seemed to emanate from within rather than reflecting external sources. The objects hovered perhaps 10 feet above the waves, silent except for a low hum that was felt more than heard, a vibration that resonated in the chest, in the bones. For perhaps 5 seconds they remained visible. And then they shot upward. The acceleration was instantaneous, no gradual buildup, no visible propulsion. One moment hovering, the next moment gone, vanishing into the overcast sky so quickly that the human eye struggled to track the movement. Radar registered their ascent. Speeds exceeding Mach 3 within 2 seconds, achieved from a standing start with no sonic boom, no heat signature, no atmospheric disturbance. The incident was logged in official records, statements were taken from multiple witnesses, the sonar data was preserved and analyzed, and the conclusion recorded in the ship's incident report was stark in its honesty. Unidentified submerged and aerial objects. Origin unknown. No conventional explanation available. The crew was debriefed, the records were classified, and for years the encounter existed only in memory and in files that few had access to. But this was not an isolated event. Throughout the 1990s and into the 2000s, reports from the Catalina Channel continued to accumulate. A commercial airline pilot reported seeing 3 luminous objects emerge from the water in formation, hover briefly, then separate, one ascending, one moving north along the coast, and one descending back into the ocean. A group of recreational divers exploring a reef near Catalina Island surfaced to find a glowing disc-shaped object hovering above the water, perhaps 30 feet in diameter, rotating slowly on its axis before dropping back beneath the surface without a splash. In 2004, the USS Nimitz carrier strike group encountered similar phenomena off the coast of San Diego, events that would later become famous as the Tic Tac encounters. But what is often overlooked in those reports is that the objects were first detected underwater, tracked by the Princeton's advanced sonar systems as they moved at high speed beneath the surface before ascending into the air and engaging with Navy fighter jets. The pattern is consistent. Objects that transition seamlessly between water and air, demonstrating capabilities far beyond known technology and displaying what can only be described as intentional behavior. Skeptics have proposed explanations. Ball lightning, though it typically lasts for seconds and does not exhibit controlled movement. atmospheric optical phenomena, though these do not register on radar or sonar. Classified military technology, though no nation has publicly demonstrated the ability to transition between underwater and aerial environments at such speeds. Each explanation works for some cases, but fails when confronted with the full body of evidence. Multiple witnesses with technical training, instrument data from radar, sonar, and infrared systems, sightings that occur across decades involving different observers with no connection to one another. The Catalina anomaly, as researchers have come to call it, represents something more than isolated incidents. It suggests a pattern, a presence, a phenomenon that occurs with enough frequency to be documented, yet remains elusive enough to avoid definitive proof. And the channel itself holds clues. The waters off Catalina are deep, in places exceeding 3,000 feet, and riddled with underwater canyons and submerged ridges that create complex topography. The area sits atop significant geological fault lines, which some researchers believe could provide access to deeper subterranean chambers or provide geothermal energy for operations requiring power. But more intriguing is what lies just to the north, along the coast, near Malibu. Because if the Catalina Channel is where the activity surfaces, Point Dume may be where it originates.
Chapter 4. The Lost Signals at Point Dume. Further north, where the Santa Monica Mountains meet the Pacific, lies Point Dume, a headland of striking beauty, popular with hikers and surfers, unremarkable in most respects, except for what lies beneath. In 2014, a researcher named Jimmy Church was examining Google Earth imagery of the seafloor off Malibu when he noticed something unusual. At a depth of roughly 2,000 feet, a structure appeared on the sonar-generated map, a formation with features that seemed distinctly unnatural. Straight lines, right angles, what appeared to be an entrance or opening flanked by what could be interpreted as columns or pillars. The structure measured approximately 3 miles across, sitting on a plateau surrounded by otherwise featureless ocean floor. Church released his findings publicly, and the discovery went viral. Within days, websites proclaimed it evidence of an underwater alien base. Television documentaries speculated about extraterrestrial facilities hidden beneath the Pacific. The image was analyzed, enhanced, debated, and dismissed in cycles that continue even today. But beyond the sensationalism, legitimate questions remain. Marine geologists quickly offered explanations. Some suggested the structure was a digital artifact, a glitch in the sonar data caused by how Google Earth's mapping software interpolates incomplete information. When sonar data is sparse, algorithms fill in gaps based on surrounding topography, occasionally creating patterns that appear artificial. Others proposed natural geological processes. Underwater lava flows can create surprisingly symmetrical formations as molten rock cools and fractures along stress lines. Sediment deposition over millennia can form layers that, when eroded by currents, reveal linear patterns. These explanations are reasonable, logical, scientifically sound, and yet they struggle to account for certain details. The structure's placement, for instance. It sits at a depth that's deep enough to avoid casual detection, yet shallow enough to be theoretically accessible by advanced submersibles. Its orientation appears deliberate, aligned in ways that some researchers argue exceed the randomness of natural formation. Dr. Charles Clancy, a geologist who specializes in underwater volcanic formations,
examined the imagery and stated, while natural processes can create geometric patterns, the combination of features visible in this formation, the parallel lines, the apparent symmetry, the consistent spacing, is unusual enough to warrant direct investigation. But direct investigation has not occurred. No major oceanographic institution has committed resources to a thorough survey. The National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, released a statement noting that unusual formations on the seafloor are common and typically result from natural processes, but did not send a team to verify. The structure remains in a curious limbo, documented enough to exist in public awareness, unexplored enough to fuel speculation. Yet the Point Dume area has more to offer than a single anomalous sonar image. Fishermen and recreational divers who frequent the area have reported strange phenomena for decades, long before the Google Earth discovery brought the location into public view. One account, documented in a 1987 Coast Guard log, describes a fishing vessel that experienced complete instrument failure while anchored near Point Dume. Compass, GPS, depth finder, and radio all ceased functioning simultaneously. The crew reported seeing a faint glow beneath the boat, not bright, but perceptible in the dark water, like ambient light reflecting off something submerged. When they pulled anchor and moved half a mile away, all instruments returned to normal function. When they returned to the original spot, the instruments failed again. The crew, unsettled, relocated for the remainder of the night. The incident was reported, but never investigated. Another diver, a veteran of over 30 years exploring California's coastal waters, described an experience near the reported location of the structure in 2011. His name was Marcus Webb, a marine biologist who had logged over 2,000 dives. He was not easily spooked. Webb was exploring at a depth of about 180 feet when his equipment began malfunctioning. His compass spun erratically, the needle circling with no fixed direction. His depth gauge fluctuated despite maintaining constant depth. He described feeling a vibration, not audible, but physical, resonating through the water and into his body. And then, beneath him, he saw what he could only describe as an absence. Not darkness in the usual sense, but a void, a section of water that seemed darker than it should be, denser, as if something vast was deliberately absorbing light. He felt, irrationally but intensely, that he was being observed. Webb surfaced immediately, his heart racing despite decades of training to remain calm underwater. When he reached the boat, all his equipment was functioning normally. He checked his instruments, no damage, no malfunction, everything worked perfectly. He never dived that site again, and in his personal journal, he wrote, "I have dived shipwrecks, caves, and deep walls. I have encountered sharks and navigated strong currents, but I have never felt what I felt that day, the certainty, instinctual and absolute, that I was somewhere I did not belong." Stories like these exist in margins. They are not peer-reviewed studies or official reports. They are anecdotal, subjective, impossible to verify, but they accumulate, and collectively, they suggest that something about the waters off Point Dume affects instruments, perception, and the instinctive responses of experienced professionals. Then, there are the sounds. acoustic anomalies detected near Point Dume have been documented intermittently since the 1970s. Sonar operators on fishing vessels and research boats have recorded signals that do not correspond to known marine life or geological activity. Pings that register at regular intervals, every 8.7 seconds to be precise, repeating for hours before ceasing abruptly. One such recording, made in 1994 by a NOAA research vessel, captured a sequence of tones that seemed to ascend and descend in pitch with mathematical precision. The recording was analyzed by acoustic specialists who concluded that the pattern was highly regular, possibly artificial, but of unknown origin. No follow-up investigation was conducted. Funding was allocated elsewhere. The recording was archived. But the pattern persists in other data. Hydrophones deployed along the California coast have occasionally picked up similar signals, brief, structured, and originating from depths where no human activity occurs. Dr. Elena Vasquez, an acoustic ecologist who studies underwater soundscapes, reviewed several of these recordings and noted, "The ocean is full of sounds we don't understand, biological, geological, even anthropogenic noise from distant shipping can create unexpected patterns, but some of these signals have characteristics that are difficult to reconcile with known sources. They warrant further study." Further study, however, requires resources, institutional support, and a willingness to investigate phenomena that exist at the edge of credibility. And in academia, where funding is limited and reputations fragile, that willingness is rare. So, the signals continue. The instruments malfunction. The divers surface with stories they struggle to articulate, and the structure, visible on Google Earth for anyone to examine, remains unvisited by those with the means to explore it. The mystery of Point Dume is not a mystery of absence.
Chapter 5. Voices from the Abyss. Sound travels through water faster and farther than through air. A whale's song can cross entire ocean basins. The crack of breaking ice can be heard hundreds of miles away. And deep within the Pacific, beneath the thermocline where temperatures plunge and pressure mounts, sounds propagate with eerie clarity, creating an acoustic environment where whispers become echoes and silence is never truly silent. For decades, scientists have deployed hydrophones, underwater microphones, to listen to the ocean. They listen for whale migrations, volcanic eruptions, seismic activity. They map the soundscape of the deep, cataloging the natural symphony of the sea. But sometimes they hear something else. The most famous is the bloop. Recorded in 1997 by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's Equatorial Pacific Ocean Autonomous Hydrophone Array, the bloop was an ultra-low frequency sound detected by sensors over 3,000 miles apart. The sound was powerful enough to be heard across the entire Pacific Basin, a feat that suggested either an enormous source or an incredibly efficient acoustic propagation. When researchers first analyzed the bloop, they were struck by its profile. The sound rose rapidly in frequency over about 1 minute, creating a bloop shape on the spectrogram. And its characteristics suggested a biological origin, similar in structure to sounds made by marine animals, but far louder than anything produced by known species. If the bloop came from a living creature, that creature would need to be several times larger than a blue whale, the largest animal ever known to have existed on Earth. The implications were staggering.
And for years, the bloop remained one of the ocean's most tantalizing mysteries, fueling speculation about giant, undiscovered species lurking in the unexplored depths. Then, in 2005, NOAA revised its assessment. Further analysis suggested the bloop was most likely an ice quake, the sound of a massive ice sheet fracturing and calving in Antarctica. The acoustic signature matched known ice quake recordings, the location triangulated to the Antarctic ice shelf region. The explanation was consistent with the data. And yet, the bloop lives on in public imagination, not as a solved mystery, but as a symbol. A reminder that the ocean still holds sounds we struggle to explain, phenomena that push the boundaries of what we thought possible. But the bloop is not alone. In 1991, researchers began detecting another sound, the upsweep. Unlike the bloop, which occurred once and was never repeated, the upsweep is continuous. It has been recorded for over 3 decades, rising and falling in intensity, but never fully disappearing. The upsweep consists of a series of narrow-band upsweeping tones, repeating every few seconds. The sound appears to originate from somewhere in the Pacific, possibly near volcanic seamounts or hydrothermal vent systems. Its frequency modulates in regular patterns, creating a rhythm that some have described as mechanical, others as organic. Scientists theorize volcanic activity, perhaps magma chambers expanding and contracting, or superheated water interacting with cooler seawater, creating resonances that propagate through the ocean. The explanation is plausible. Volcanic processes are known to produce acoustic signals. But the regularity of the upsweep troubles some researchers. Natural processes tend toward chaos, variation, unpredictability. Yet the upsweep maintains its pattern year after year, with only gradual changes in intensity. Dr. Robert Dizak, an oceanographer with NOAA's Pacific Marine Environmental Laboratory, has studied the upsweep extensively. In an interview, he noted, "The upsweep is almost certainly volcanic in origin, but the consistency of its structure is remarkable. It's like the Earth has a heartbeat in that region, and we're only just beginning to understand what creates it." Then there's the Julia sound, recorded in 1999. A brief but powerful sound that lasted about 15 seconds, characterized by a rapid increase in frequency. Triangulation placed its source somewhere near the southern Pacific Ocean. Analysis suggested either an iceberg scraping the seafloor or a large ice sheet fracturing, both plausible explanations for the region. And yet, when researchers listen to the Julia, they hear something that feels less like ice and more like communication. It has a structure, a rhythm, almost a cadence. It's not random noise. It's organized, deliberate. Of course, human perception is notoriously poor at distinguishing pattern from randomness. We are wired to see faces in clouds, hear voices in static. Pareidolia, the tendency to perceive meaningful patterns in random data, is a fundamental aspect of cognition. But what if occasionally the pattern is real?
There are other sounds, lesser known but equally strange. The slowdown, recorded in 1997, is a sound that gradually decreased in frequency over about 7 minutes. Hydrophones spaced thousands of miles apart detected it simultaneously, suggesting a source of enormous power. The sound was traced to the Antarctic region and is believed to be caused by ice sliding across the ocean floor or ice shelves collapsing. The train, also recorded in 1997, sounds exactly as its name suggests, like a distant locomotive rumbling through the deep for minutes at a time. Its origin remains uncertain, though seismic activity is the leading hypothesis. And then there are the classified sounds, the ones that don't appear in public databases or academic papers.
In 2003, a U.S. Navy submarine operating in the Western Pacific detected a sound that was immediately flagged as anomalous. The sound was a series of tones, distinct, evenly spaced, and modulated in ways that suggested intentionality. The submarine sonar operator, following protocol, recorded the sound and forwarded it to Naval Intelligence for analysis. According to a source who requested anonymity, the analysis concluded that the sound did not match any known biological, geological, or human-made source. It was filed under Unidentified Acoustic Event, and the submarine crew was instructed not to discuss it. Similar incidents have occurred sporadically across decades. Sounds that are recorded, analyzed, and quietly shelved because they fit no existing category. Dr. Christopher Fox, who formerly worked with NOAA's acoustic monitoring program, acknowledged in an off-the-record conversation that there are sounds in our database that we simply cannot explain, not because we lack the tools, but because they don't fit any model we have. Some are likely natural phenomena we haven't documented yet, but some remain genuinely puzzling. The ocean is not silent. It hums with life, with motion, with forces both known and unknown. And embedded within that acoustic tapestry are signals, faint, fleeting, and frustratingly elusive, that suggest intelligence might not be exclusive to the surface world. But if sound is the ocean's language, then perhaps myth is humanity's way of translating what we have always heard but never fully understood. Chapter 6: The Watchers of the Deep. Long before sonar and submarines, before hydrophones and deep-sea explorers, humans told stories about the ocean. And across cultures separated by vast distances and millennia of time, those stories share a curious consistency. They speak of beings who came from beneath the waves, of cities submerged in ancient floods, of gods and spirits who dwelt in the deep and occasionally rose to interact with the surface world. In Polynesian mythology, the ocean was not merely water, but a living realm, home to gods and ancestors who moved between worlds. Tangaroa, the Maori god of the sea, was said to dwell in the deepest trenches, watching over the boundary between the known and the unknowable. Sailors made offerings to him before long voyages, not to appease his wrath, but to acknowledge his presence in waters where human understanding ended and something older began. The stories describe Tangaroa's domain as filled with light that came from no sun, structures built of coral and crystal that glowed with their own luminescence. Those who ventured too far from shore sometimes glimpsed his palace, a fleeting vision of impossible architecture beneath the waves, visible for only a moment before the ocean concealed it again. In Japanese folklore, the Ryujin, the dragon king of the sea, lived in a palace called Ryugu-jo, located at the bottom of the ocean. The palace was said to be made of red and white coral, and within it time moved differently. A day in the surface world might pass as years in the Dragon King's realm, or vice versa. Fishermen who ventured too far sometimes claimed to see lights beneath their boats, the glow of the Dragon King's court, visible only to those the ocean chose to reveal itself to. These were not considered fables. They were knowledge, woven into the cultural fabric of peoples whose lives depended on understanding the sea. In the Pacific Northwest, the Tlingit people spoke of the Kushtaka, beings who lived beneath the waves and could take human form but were not human. Encounters with them were transformative. Those who saw them returned changed, often unable or unwilling to speak of what they had witnessed. The Kushtaka were described as neither malevolent nor benevolent, but other, existing in a realm adjacent to humanity, occasionally intersecting, but fundamentally separate. Similar myths appear across the Pacific. In Micronesia, stories of Ane-Niwingiti, underwater spirits who watched travelers and sometimes guided lost sailors to safety. In Hawaii, legends of the Menehune, small people who were said to have built structures along the coast and beneath the waves, vanishing before the arrival of Polynesian settlers. In the Philippines, tales of the Katao, aquatic humanoids who lived in underwater cities and occasionally came ashore to trade or interact with coastal villages. The Katao were described as technologically advanced, possessing knowledge of metallurgy and navigation that exceeded contemporary human capabilities. Modern scholars typically interpret these myths as metaphorical, ways for ancient peoples to process the ocean's vastness and danger. Anthropologists argue that such stories serve social functions, teaching respect for the sea, explaining natural phenomena, and providing narrative structures for cultural identity. And there is truth in that interpretation. Myths do serve these purposes. But what if they also served as records? What if across centuries humans witnessed phenomena they could not explain in scientific terms and translated those experiences into the language of myth? What if the glowing lights reported by modern witnesses are the same lights described in ancient stories, now documented with instruments, but still unexplained? Consider the overlap. The areas with the highest concentration of USO sightings, the Santa Catalina Channel, the waters off Puerto Rico, the coast of Japan near Fukuoka, the Norwegian Sea, the waters around New Zealand, are also places where myths of underwater beings and submerged cities are strongest. The Catalina Channel, where Navy crews report objects breaching the surface, is part of a region where Chumas legends spoke of beings who came from beneath the ocean, bringing knowledge and technology. The waters near Puerto Rico, site of numerous USO encounters documented by local fishermen and U.S. military personnel, are also the location of legends about lost underwater cities and beings who moved between sea and sky. Off the coast of Japan, where pilots and fishermen report luminous objects rising from the ocean, ancient stories describe the Ryugen's palace glowing beneath the waves. Is this coincidence? Do myths cluster around these locations because they are naturally dramatic, deep waters, strong currents, active geology, and thus inspire both wonder and sightings of natural phenomena? Perhaps. Or perhaps the myths are older than we think. Perhaps they represent humanity's first attempts to document something real, encounters with phenomena that have occurred not just in recent decades, but for centuries or millennia, witnessed by peoples who lack the language of science, but possess the language of story. Dr. Jacques Vallée, a computer scientist and UFO researcher, has long argued that the modern UFO phenomenon may be a continuation of something much older.
In his book, Passport to Magonia, Vallée catalogs historical accounts of encounters with non-human entities, from medieval fairy abductions to religious visions to modern alien encounters, and notes the striking similarities in structure, content, and reported behavior. The hypothesis is controversial. It challenges both skeptics, who dismiss all such accounts as fiction, and believers who insist the phenomenon is strictly extraterrestrial. But it offers a framework for understanding why myths and modern sightings overlap so consistently. If non-human intelligence has visited Earth, whether from another world, another dimension, or from within the ocean itself, then those visits would have been witnessed throughout history. And the witnesses would have described what they saw using the conceptual tools available to them. Ancient sailors who saw luminous objects rising from the sea would have understood them as manifestations of gods or spirits. Modern witnesses, armed with scientific literacy, describe them as craft or technology. But the core experience, something unknown, exhibiting intelligence emerging from the ocean, remains consistent. And if this is true, then the myths are not just stories. They are data, encoded in metaphor, preserved in cultural memory, waiting for us to recognize their value. But data requires interpretation, and interpretation requires tools that science has spent centuries refining.
Chapter 7: Between Science and Speculation. Science does not believe in mysteries. It believes in questions. When confronted with claims of underwater bases, unidentified submerged objects, and anomalous sonar readings, the scientific community does not respond with dismissal, but with rigorous skepticism, the kind that demands evidence, repeatability, and adherence to natural law. This is not closed-mindedness, it is discipline. Marine biologists point out that the deep ocean is full of phenomena that can mimic artificial structures. Hydrothermal vents create mineral deposits that grow in surprisingly symmetrical formations, layering minerals in ways that can resemble constructed pillars or walls. Volcanic lava flows cool and fracture along stress lines, creating parallel ridges and geometric patterns. Sediment layers, compressed over millennia, can form strata that appear artificial when exposed by erosion. Dr. Rachel Morrison, a marine geologist with over 20 years of experience mapping the Pacific seafloor, has examined many of the anomalous formations that appear on sonar imagery. Her assessment is measured. Natural processes are capable of extraordinary regularity. Crystal formation, lava cooling, sediment deposition, all of these can create shapes that look designed. Without direct physical investigation, it's impossible to determine whether a formation is artificial or natural based on sonar alone. She adds, but that doesn't mean we should dismiss every anomaly. It means we need to investigate. And unfortunately, deep-sea investigation is expensive, time-consuming, and difficult to fund unless there's an immediate scientific or commercial benefit. Optical illusions are common on the water.
The interaction between light and wave create visual effects that can deceive even experienced observers. Ball lightning, though rare, can occur over the ocean, producing glowing orbs that move erratically before dissipating. Bioluminescent algae blooms can create widespread surface glow that, under certain conditions, appears to pulse or move. As for sonar anomalies, experts in underwater acoustics explain that sound behaves strangely in the deep. Temperature gradients create layers where sound waves bend, producing echoes and reflections that can register as solid objects when none exist. Salinity variations affect sound propagation, causing signals to bounce unpredictably. Schools of fish, particularly deep-sea species with gas bladders, can produce sonar returns that resemble large, solid masses. Dr. Henry Chow, an acoustic oceanographer, notes that sonar is an interpretive tool. It doesn't show you the ocean directly, it shows you how sound interacts with the ocean. And that interaction is influenced by dozens of variables. Misidentification is common, even among trained operators. These explanations are not excuses. They are the necessary work of science, testing every claim against known principles before accepting it as anomalous. And in many cases, these explanations hold. The majority of USO sightings, when investigated thoroughly, resolve into natural phenomena or human-made objects, misidentified submarines, experimental military craft operating under classified programs, whales and other marine life producing unexpected sonar returns, weather phenomena creating perceptual errors. But not all of them. There remains a small, persistent percentage of cases that resist conventional explanation. Cases where multiple witnesses, often with military or scientific training, observe objects that demonstrate capabilities beyond known technology. Where radar, sonar, infrared, and visual confirmation align. Where the data suggest not misperception, but an encounter with something genuinely unknown. The 1992 incident in the Catalina Channel involved a trained Navy crew, advanced sonar systems, and visual confirmation from multiple observers. The objects demonstrated controlled movement, coordinated behavior, and transition between water and air, capabilities that no known technology could achieve. The 2004 Nimitz encounters involved multiple fighter jets, radar operators on the USS Princeton, and advanced infrared tracking systems. The objects were tracked underwater before ascending into the air, demonstrating speeds and maneuverability that defied physics as understood by aerospace engineers. These cases are documented, they are real, and they remain unexplained. Dr. Travis Taylor, an aerospace engineer who has worked with the U.S. Department of Defense on advanced propulsion systems, has reviewed some of these incidents. His conclusion, stated publicly, is carefully worded but significant. There are phenomena occurring in our oceans and skies that cannot be explained by any known physics or technology. That doesn't mean they're extraterrestrial. It means we don't know what they are. And until we commit to serious, funded investigation, we won't. Even skeptics acknowledge the gap. Dr. Seth Sostock, senior astronomer at the SETI Institute, has said, "The plural of anecdote is not data." But when you have consistent reports from credible witnesses backed by instrument readings occurring over decades, dismissal is not a scientific response. Investigation is. And yet, investigation remains limited. Funding for deep-sea research is allocated primarily to projects with clear commercial or environmental applications, mapping the seafloor for mineral resources, monitoring ocean health and climate change, studying marine ecosystems. Research into anomalous phenomena, sightings, acoustic anomalies, unexplained sonar returns falls into a bureaucratic gap. It's not commercial. It's not immediately relevant to climate science. It's not easily publishable in peer-reviewed journals. And so it languishes, documented but unexplored, filed in archives that few access. The result is a strange paradox. We have more data than ever before, yet less understanding, more sophisticated instruments, yet fewer answers, more witnesses coming forward, yet less institutional willingness to engage with their testimony. Perhaps this is because the implications are unsettling. If the phenomena are natural, they reveal how little we understand about our own planet, a humbling but manageable truth. If they are artificial, human-made and classified, they suggest governments possess technologies far beyond public knowledge, raising questions about secrecy, transparency, and the control of information. And if they are neither natural nor human, then we are confronted with a reality that challenges every assumption about our place in the universe and our understanding of who or what shares this planet with us. So the ocean keeps its secrets, not because it refuses to speak, but because we are not yet ready to listen.
Chapter 8. The Silent Architects. If something unknown operates beneath the Pacific, the question becomes, why there? Why the ocean when the vastness of space offers infinite concealment? Why water with its crushing pressure and corrosive salinity when the vacuum of space is far less hostile to advanced technology? The answer, perhaps, lies in proximity. Space is vast, but it is also empty, cold, distant from resources. If an intelligence required access to Earth, whether for observation, resource extraction, or long-term presence, space offers only orbits and remote monitoring. It provides no shelter from solar radiation, no protection from micrometeoroid impacts, no access to materials beyond what can be launched from the surface. The ocean, by contrast, offers everything. Concealment, first and foremost. Human activity is concentrated on land and in shallow coastal waters. The open ocean, particularly at depth, is a wilderness. Satellites cannot see through water. Radar is ineffective below the surface. Sonar can detect objects, but only if they are large, moving, or positioned within range of hydrophone arrays, and even then, interpretation is difficult, ambiguous, prone to error. A facility located at 2,000 feet or deeper would be nearly invisible to casual detection. It could operate for years, even decades, without discovery. Naval vessels pass overhead without awareness. Commercial shipping follows predictable routes, leaving vast stretches of ocean unwatched. Research expeditions are infrequent, expensive, and focused on specific scientific goals that rarely include searching for artificial structures. In short, the ocean is the largest blind spot on Earth.
Second, resources. The seafloor is rich in minerals essential for advanced technology. Manganese nodules, potato-sized lumps scattered across the abyssal plains, contain cobalt, nickel, copper, and rare earth elements in concentrations far higher than most terrestrial deposits. Hydrothermal vents provide geothermal energy, accessible and abundant. Seawater itself contains dissolved metals, deuterium for potential fusion reactions, and chemical compounds that could support life or technology. If an intelligence required raw materials or energy, the seafloor would provide both in abundance, with minimal need for transportation or surface interaction. Third, isolation. The ocean is hostile to human presence. We can visit it briefly with great effort and expense, but we cannot inhabit it. A base built beneath the waves would be effectively unreachable by conventional means, insulated from interference, conflict, or contamination by surface activity. And fourth, though this is speculation, the ocean may offer something less tangible, but equally valuable: a buffer. If an intelligence sought to observe Earth without direct contact, the ocean would be the ideal vantage point, close enough to monitor atmospheric composition, technological development, biological diversity, distant enough to remain separate, avoiding the cultural, political, and psychological complications of overt presence. This is not proof. It is a framework, a way of thinking about why the ocean, specifically, might be chosen by something that wishes to remain hidden. But chosen by whom or what? The extraterrestrial hypothesis is the most popular. If craft capable of interstellar travel exist, the technology to operate underwater would be trivial by comparison. Material science capable of withstanding the stresses of space travel would easily handle oceanic pressure. Propulsion systems that can achieve relativistic speeds could navigate water with minimal adaptation. And if extraterrestrial visitors have been observing Earth for an extended period, decades, centuries, millennia, establishing a permanent presence would be logical. Rather than relying on periodic visits from distant locations, a base on Earth would provide continuous access, real-time data, and the ability to respond to developments as they occur. The ocean would be the logical choice for such a base. It offers everything needed: concealment, resources, isolation, and it avoids the complexities of establishing a presence on land where detection would be inevitable and contact unavoidable. But there are other possibilities. Some researchers propose a terrestrial origin, secret installations built by governments possessing technology far beyond public knowledge. The United States, Russia, and China all have deep-sea research programs, and much of their work remains classified. Could some of the anomalies be evidence of covert operations rather than otherworldly presence? It's possible. Advanced nations have the resources, the motivation, and the secrecy apparatus to construct underwater facilities. Experimental propulsion systems capable of transitioning between water and air could explain some USO sightings. But the timeline creates problems. Reports of underwater lights, unidentified submerged objects, and anomalous sonar readings date back centuries, long before any nation possessed the technology for deep-sea construction or advanced propulsion. Spanish sailors in the 16th century reported lights beneath their ships in the Pacific. British naval logs from the 18th century describe luminous objects rising from the water near the coast of Australia. Unless classified programs are far older and more advanced than any evidence suggests, the human origin hypothesis struggles to account for the historical depth of the phenomenon. A third possibility, more speculative, more unsettling, is that the intelligence is neither extraterrestrial nor human, but something native to Earth. What if intelligence evolved independently in the deep ocean? The idea sounds like science fiction, but consider the precedent. Life on Earth has repeatedly evolved complex solutions to environmental challenges. Eyes evolved independently multiple times. Flight evolved in insects, birds, bats, and even fish. Intelligence itself, defined as problem-solving ability, tool use, and social complexity, has emerged in primates, cetaceans, corvids, and cephalopods. If intelligence can arise in such diverse forms, why not in the deep ocean? The environment is stable, predation is lower than in surface ecosystems, hydrothermal vents provide consistent energy, timescales are vast, plenty of opportunity for evolutionary innovation, and intelligence adapted to deep-sea conditions would be invisible to us. It would not build cities visible from space. It would not emit radio signals we could detect. It would exist in a realm we rarely visit, communicating in ways we do not understand, pursuing goals utterly alien to surface-dwelling creatures. This hypothesis lacks direct evidence, but it highlights our limitations of our assumptions. We search for intelligence that resembles us, technological, communicative, curious. But intelligence might take forms we have not imagined, operating according to principles we do not recognize. And perhaps that is the lesson the ocean offers, that the universe is not obligated to present its mysteries in terms we can easily grasp. So we return to the question, what lies beneath? The answer for now remains elusive, fragmentary, tantalizing. But the search continues, and with each new sonar scan, each acoustic recording, each witness account, the picture becomes a little clearer or a little stranger.
Chapter 9. Reflections from the Abyss. The ocean has a rhythm. Waves rise and fall, tides ebb and flow. Currents circle the globe in patterns that have persisted for millennia. And within that rhythm, human curiosity rises and falls as well, surging with new discoveries, receding when answers prove elusive. We have been searching for decades, deploying instruments, analyzing data, cataloging anomalies. And what have we found? Not proof, not definitive answers, but patterns. Patterns of sightings that cluster in specific locations, patterns of acoustic signals that repeat with regularity, patterns of behavior, objects that move with purpose, demonstrate awareness, and vanish when observed too closely. These patterns do not constitute evidence in the strictest sense. They are not reproducible in controlled experiments. They cannot be summoned on demand, studied in laboratories, dissected and understood. But they are real, documented, persistent. And they invite a question that goes beyond science, beyond skepticism, into the realm of philosophy. Why do we keep searching? What drives humans to explore the ocean's depths, knowing that the environment is hostile, the cost is high, and the answers may never come? Perhaps it is because mystery itself has value. In a world increasingly mapped, quantified, and understood, the ocean remains a frontier. It holds the promise that something unknown still exists, that not everything has been discovered, cataloged, and explained, and that promise sustains a particular kind of hope. The hope that wonder is not dead, that the universe still holds surprises, that we are not alone in the vastness. This is not a scientific motivation, it is a human one. Science seeks to eliminate mystery through understanding, but humanity needs mystery to remain curious, to keep asking questions, to avoid the stagnation that comes when everything is known. The ocean provides that mystery. It is vast enough to hide secrets, deep enough to resist easy exploration, and strange enough to challenge our assumptions. And perhaps that is why the mystery endures, not because we cannot solve it, but because, on some level, we do not want to. Not yet. Not until we are ready for what the answer might reveal. Dr. Sylvia Ayre, the renowned oceanographer and explorer, once said, "We have barely touched the ocean. We know more about the surface of Mars than we do about the deep sea. And yet the ocean is our life support system. It regulates climate, produces oxygen, sustains biodiversity. If we do not understand it, we cannot protect it." Her words highlight a paradox. The ocean is essential to our survival, yet we treat it as peripheral. We focus on space exploration, Mars missions, the search for exoplanets, all worthy endeavors, but we neglect the ocean, which is closer, more accessible, and more directly relevant to our continued existence. Why? Perhaps because space is aspirational. It represents the future, expansion, the next frontier. The ocean, by contrast, feels like the past, something we have always known, something familiar. But familiarity is an illusion. The ocean is no more known than the surface of another planet, and within its depths, mysteries await that could redefine our understanding of life, intelligence, and our place in the cosmos. If we found evidence of non-human intelligence in the ocean, whether extraterrestrial, terrestrial, or something entirely other, it would be the most significant discovery in human history. It would force us to reconsider theology, philosophy, science. It would challenge our sense of uniqueness, our belief that intelligence is rare and precious. And perhaps we are not ready for that. Perhaps the mystery persists not because the evidence is lacking, but because the implications are too profound to confront without preparation. So we continue. We map a little more of the seafloor. We listen to a few more acoustic signals. We document another sighting, another anomaly, another piece of the puzzle. And the ocean, patient and vast,
waits for us to be ready.
Chapter 10, Where the Light Cannot Follow. The ocean does not owe us answers. It does not reveal itself on demand, does not bend to curiosity or technology. It simply exists, vast, dark, and indifferent to human ambition. And yet, we cannot stop searching. There is something in the human spirit that refuses to accept mystery as permanent. We are drawn to the unknown, compelled to explore, driven by a need to understand that transcends logic or self-preservation. We dive into the abyss not because it is safe, but because it is there. We listen to sounds we cannot explain, not because we expect clarity, but because silence is intolerable. This impulse has driven every great discovery in history. It sent explorers across oceans when the world was thought to be flat. It launched us into space when the cosmos was believed to be unreachable. And it will, eventually, take us into the deepest trenches of the Pacific, where pressure is absolute and darkness is total. What we will find there is unknown. Perhaps nothing. Perhaps only geology, biology, the expected wonders of a planet still revealing its secrets. Or perhaps something else. Something that has been watching, waiting, existing in parallel to humanity for longer than we can imagine. The evidence, scattered and fragmentary, suggests that something operates beneath the Pacific, something that moves with intention, demonstrates technology, and avoids direct contact. Whether it is extraterrestrial, terrestrial, or something entirely beyond our categories, we do not yet know. But we are closer than we have ever been. Technology improves, sonar resolution increases, autonomous submersibles dive deeper, stay longer, see more clearly. Acoustic monitoring becomes more sophisticated, capable of distinguishing signal from noise with greater precision. And slowly, piece by piece, the picture emerges. Not a complete picture, not yet, but a sketch, an outline, a suggestion of shape where before there was only darkness. And as that picture becomes clearer, we must ask ourselves, are we ready for what it might reveal? If we do discover that intelligence exists in the ocean, whether it has always been there or arrived from elsewhere, the world will change. Not immediately, not dramatically, but fundamentally. Our religions will have to accommodate the existence of other minds. Our philosophies will have to expand beyond human-centered frameworks. Our sciences will have to revise assumptions about the rarity of intelligence and the conditions required for its emergence. And individually, each of us will have to confront a truth that is both humbling and exhilarating. We are not alone, not in the universe, and not on our own planet. This realization will not come all at once. It will arrive in increments, a confirmed sighting here, an undeniable piece of evidence there. Each revelation will be debated, analyzed, contested. Skeptics will demand more proof. Believers will see confirmation of what they always suspected. And the majority will watch, uncertain, as the boundary between known and unknown shifts beneath their feet.
But eventually, the weight of evidence will become undeniable. And when that moment comes, The world will not end. Life will continue. But our understanding of life, what it is, where it exists, and what it means to be intelligent, will expand in ways we cannot yet imagine. Until then, the ocean waits. It holds its secrets close, releasing them only when we are ready, only when we have earned the knowledge through effort, patience, and humility. The Pacific is patient. It has been here for millions of years, and it will be here long after we are gone. It does not hurry. It does not reveal itself to satisfy our timelines. It simply is. And perhaps that is the final lesson, that some mysteries are not meant to be solved quickly. They are meant to live with, explored gradually, approached with respect rather than conquest. The ocean teaches us patience. It teaches us humility. It teaches us that the universe does not owe us understanding, but invites us to seek it anyway. And so we continue. We watch the radar screens. We analyze the sonar data. We listen to the recordings of sounds that may be nothing or may be everything. We tell stories, build theories, argue over evidence that remains just out of focus. And beneath it all, the Pacific rolls on, indifferent, eternal, and utterly silent about what it hides. But silence is not absence. Darkness is not emptiness. Beneath the midnight waters where light cannot follow and pressure becomes absolute, the truth sleeps, waiting, watching, resting in the cold embrace of the abyss. And one day, perhaps soon, perhaps in a future we cannot yet imagine, that truth will rise. It will breach the surface, not with violence, but with quiet inevitability. It will reveal itself not because we forced it, but because the time has finally come. And when that day arrives, when the ocean yields its deepest secret and the mystery dissolves into revelation, we will look back on this moment, this long, patient search through darkness, and understand that the journey was never about finding answers. It was about learning to ask the right questions. It was about becoming the kind of species that can handle the truth, that can meet the unknown with courage rather than fear, curiosity rather than aggression. The ocean has been testing us. Every sonar anomaly, every unexplained sighting, every acoustic signal we cannot interpret, these are not obstacles. They are invitations. Invitations to grow, to evolve, to expand our understanding beyond the narrow confines of what we think we know. And when we are ready, when we have proven ourselves capable of humility, wonder, and respect, the ocean will speak, not in words, but in revelation, and the world will never be the same. Until that day, we drift, we wonder, we dream of disclosure, and the ocean, patient and vast, simply waits. The waves continue their eternal rhythm. The moon pulls the tides. The currents flow in patterns older than memory. And beneath it all, in the deep places where no light has ever reached, something watches waiting. Thank you for drifting with us into the unknown. If this journey stirred something within you, a question, a memory, a quiet unease, we invite you to share it in the comments below. What do you believe lies beneath the Pacific's surface? What mysteries call to you from the deep? Have you ever experienced something you could not explain? Your thoughts, your stories, your questions, they are part of this exploration. They add to the collective search, the shared curiosity that drives us all toward the edge of the unknown. If you found yourself lost in these waters, consider joining us again. There are more stories to tell, more shadows to explore, more edges of the unknown waiting just beyond the light. Subscribe and drift with us into the mysteries that shape our world and challenge our understanding. And if this journey resonated with you, if it made you think or feel or question, share it. Let others join the search, because the more eyes watching, the more ears listening, the closer we come to the truth. Until then, keep looking, keep questioning, keep drifting toward the places where the maps run out and the mystery begins. Because the ocean is vast, the night is long, and somewhere in the silence between waves, the truth is waiting, not hidden, not lost, just patient.